Welcome to Beyond the Beers, conversations with men that break the stereotype. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and today I'm coming to you from Sydney's Coastal Walk on the South Head, and I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Tom Stranger. Tom.
Hey, Mike.
Now, Tom is recently co-authored a book about a subject that's brought quite a bit of media attention. I think that's probably safe to say, Tom.
Indeed.
So, should we crack into today's chat?
Sounds good.
Very nice.
I'm looking to kind of step out into the public realm, I guess. So I did Google my name just yesterday.
Nice.
And the
Don't
first...
worry, I've done it plenty of times.
Yeah. The first article that came up is Tom Stranger is, I think, articulate, funny, attractive, and a rapist.
Okay.
But it's a reality. It's one of the articles that got written. It was a good article, along with a lot of the media that was put out around the book that I was involved in and the TED Talk, which struck some very personal chords on a very difficult issue. And
so can you take us into the book there a little bit?
Yeah, for
Give
sure.
us the basic premise, I suppose.
Yeah, the book is I guess a memoir. It's a historical, honest and very plainful and factual retelling of a 20+ year history. And it begins with a time back in 1996 when I was 18 years old. I was an exchange student in Iceland. And I'll give you the abbreviated version, but I was attending a school. At this school I met a girl called Thordis, and we had a very typical teenage romance. It's kind of around November, December in 1996. We'd been together for about a month. There was, a consenting, lovely, very typical teenage romance. We hung out, held hands. This was about three months or so into my exchange. There was a school ball, and the Christmas ball it was a big affair, all your finery and fancy clothes. I was drinking with a friend. I met Thordis at the ball, and then very shortly after we arrived, Thordis became really sick. She'd had quite a bit to drink and ended up in the girls' toilets. I'd been around a fair amount of binge drinking back home, so I took it upon myself to think it's my job to take her home. So I did, in a taxi, and then once at her home I made some really dark choices that caused an immeasurable amount of hurt. And there was no consent. Thordis wasn't able to give it because she was incapacitated, and there's no other word for it. It was rape. And this was something that wasn't over quickly. And the next day I left that night, and then the next day I didn't have this jarring realization of what I'd done. Fast forward about 9 years to 2005.
Okay, so quite some time.
Yeah. She wrote me a letter, explained what she'd been through, explained what I subjected her to, and basically it began a process of me acknowledging and taking responsibility and listening to Thordis and hearing her out and growing some understanding of what the ramifications of my choices were.
Yeah. So I can only imagine that was a very confronting period for you.
Yeah.
How did you start to process that email or the letter and then the emailing that went after that?
Yeah, I mean it was irrefutable. It was a case of me recognizing myself in the details. Kind of shards of the memories of that night came back. So there was no denying from there on in. There was no suppressing it and pushing it away. Some of it made sense. I hadn't been in a particularly good relationship with myself for that period. So it triggered a lot. There was a long process to come to terms with the act, the term rapist. It was 100% only possible because I was talking to Thordis. There became a real truth and a reality that I just had to find a place to sit this, to own it, to absorb it and integrate it. And if I was had to have any kind of chance to be a balanced, I don't know, normal person, I guess, with a loving relationship with yourself,
Yeah.
I think you need to be able to find a way to understand the choices you've made
Yeah.
and to take responsibility for them.
Absolutely. So there'd been a fair while of communication up until this point.
Long time.
So what happened? A meeting happened. How did that come about?
Thordis suggested it.
Yeah.
And said, look, halfway in between Iceland and Sydney, can we meet? Can we, I guess, talk face to face? And can we get to a point where this is no longer defining our presence?
Yeah.
And can we, not be looking over our shoulder and I guess cease the analysis, because it had been a serious analysis, and it was something that, understandably, neither of us had a vested interest in having it really dictate our futures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was a week-long meeting in Cape Town, and I guess in short, it was the most powerful, shifting, incredible week of my life, I think. It was, well, in terms of effect, in terms of being able to voice things face to face to Thordis, to hear as well, and to do some letting go.
Yeah.
I'm not severed from that night. I haven't shoved it away and locked it away in a black box. There's still an attachment to it. I guess it's just been disarmed. I don't use it to beat myself with anymore.
Yeah.
And I recognise that this is something that I best come to terms with, and I guess you can't detach yourself from your shadow. It's it's stuck to you.
No, absolutely. So from 2013 there was a meeting, and then in between now we have a book and a TED Talk. So yeah, fill that gap for us.
Yeah. So in the powerful times of Cape Town, and I think after learning so much and growing so much, I think it's a natural human response to want to share, hard lessons that are learnt, and that's when I suggested to Thordis, should we speak publicly about this? This is an issue that is really prevalent. This is going on behind a lot of closed doors in every country in the world.
Yeah. And so what was her response to that?
She was, I think, motivated, keen.
So what was the first public thing?
The TED Talk.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the book was released then or not?
It was released about a month afterwards.
Yep.
Yeah.
So how did you find that period? Stepping onto a TED stage, TED Woman, I believe.
Yeah.
Was the name of the conference.
Correct.
How was that experience for you?
I mean, this was a long build-up. This was a long preparation. This was the culmination of a 16-year conversation. It was nerve-wracking as hell, but it was also an incredible opportunity to be offered a global platform, at an amazing conference.
Yeah.
Albeit the audience was primarily women. There was men peppered in the room, but this was a room full of women listening to myself and Thordis, but I was very aware of myself as a male perpetrator.
Yeah.
I might have said a few things differently, but as a whole, I think it was important to be honest, and I think it achieved a lot of the aims that it was set out to do, and it's been shared a lot of times, and I've been told that it's been shown in schools.
Okay.
And that it's generated some really powerful conversations in people's relationships and homes.
Okay, so you write the book, you step onto stage, and potentially many more things coming. So what was the purpose of that? What is the purpose of you guys stepping into the public forum with this conversation?
I mean, I can only speak for myself.
Yep.
It came from a seemingly kind of natural place, a feeling of wanting to just put it out there in recognition that this is sexual violence is occurring in many people's lives and is a reality for so many, and yet the taboo around it makes it incredibly difficult to discuss and to put into context and to have a conversation that asks the really hard questions. I like what you said at the start of the discussion around Beyond the Beers challenges stereotypes. And one of the things I think I wanted to do, and no, I absolutely want to do, is challenge stereotypes.
Yeah.
There is a trope, an archetypal perpetrator that, that is this monster.
Yeah, the label that what comes with the label of rapist.
Correct. Yeah. And that is fitting. I don't seek to change that word, but it can also be kind of dismissive and reductive, and it doesn't result in growing a really constructive conversation around root causes and proclivity, and the fact that this is an issue that is primarily perpetrated by men. In Australia, 9 out of 10 offenders are men. But this is often discussed at women's conferences or conferences that are focused around issues pertaining to women.
So do you find then that's more in the sense of how do we look after victims as opposed to how do we prevent this happening with men?
Yeah, I understand there is also a reaction and people might see an hypocrisy in me talking about this and saying, there is a problem here and men need to talk about this coming from a perpetrator. And yet, not only was I part of the problem and want to be part of the solution, I think there is a real need for men to weigh into this conversation, and it's a bloody hard one, and it's a difficult one to find the language for, and it's really hard to move into it without generalising and giving broad brushstrokes. I'm part of a minority.
Yeah.
The reality is the majority of men do not, act coercively around sex or manipulative or abusive towards their intimate partners. But it is fact that the vast majority are men. So I think, the next step from that I think it's on us. It's up to us to then have this conversation.
So then what is the conversation? There's people such as yourself who are perpetrators and coming from that angle, and then there's other men.
Non-perpetrators.
Right.
Yeah.
So is there a difference there? What stops, men who've been through your kind of experience talking, and what prevents non-perpetrators talking about this?
Well, this is where I get heart from. This is where I really hope the dots are joined and where the conversation goes. And I guess that in asking why I wanted to have this conversation and hang my dirty laundry out in public was to I guess broaden the conversation and to look at I guess the notions of traditional masculinity that are getting thrown out, that are getting challenged and changed nowadays. There are some really incredible, exciting changes going on, new qualities of masculinity, new ways of being men that is drawing the old identity into question.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see this being a big part of it?
Well, I guess
part of the conversation that a lot of us aren't touching. There's that bit over there. We can talk about, what it means to be a man and work with boys and stuff, but we'll just keep brushing that one to the side.
Yeah, and I guess the term toxic masculinity really alienates a lot of men from the conversation. And I guess my stance is I would not call masculinity toxic in and of itself. It's more the rules and forecasts of it and expectations of it that I think can be damaging for both men and for women.
The conditions and things we put on, right? It's part of the mask and the cloak of armour that we end up wearing, and it causes all sorts of things internally as well as obviously externally. Yeah,
and that's what I love where your conversation Beyond the Beers is about, looking at that, I guess, self-rejection and the performative nature of masculinity, where we're doing the dance, and we're policing.
Performing as a man.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it must be said, my ability to talk to this subject is only because of feminist theory, academia, literature, and I only have the instruments to have this conversation because it's been a long struggle to have this conversation. So these are certainly not ideas of my own also. I think it has more of a potential to be magnetic and attractive and exciting, because we do get to open up the boundaries and the walls that have been policed, I think, around masculinity.
So we can open it up a little bit more, and it provides the capability for a broader conversation around manhood, and then around specific elements, such as what we're talking about here.
Exactly.
So, and you use that term toxic masculinity, and I suppose what comes with that term, the kind of things that pad around that term, I think, is a lot of shaming, right? And so, as you've said, with sexual violence, there can be heavy stats as male perpetrators, right? And so, I think there's an easy option, perhaps, which might not be that popular in me saying that, to shame men who have perpetrated or done something quote unquote wrong.
I see that kind of concept as generated outside of the collective of men.
Yep.
So it's an external, I guess, construct.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it would be much more beneficial if we came up with language, within circles of men around how we address this without, really looking at our subjectivity and our masculinity and looking at it through, in a really dark way.
Yeah.
That's not going to attract anyone to the conversation.
And again, I think when you bring anything in there that's shaming, it adds to the problem before it adds to any solution.
It just alienates. Yeah.
So then, have you experienced some personal shaming from externally? And then what about your own internal shame when it comes to something like the label of rapist?
Yeah, I mean, this is elected, this is chosen, so to ask for some kind of sympathy for the reception of this in the public conversation is, some of it has been surprising, but a lot of it hasn't been.
Yep.
Well, I think that the conversation now around shame is also discussing the antidote, which is vulnerability, is admitting your errors or what you struggle with, or what you have difficulty emoting and dealing with. And us blokes are not traditionally famous for having that emotional kind of literacy, albeit that's changing as well.
So diving into this conversation is a big part of you, managing that side of you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in a grounded place. Yeah. I'm grateful for having a chance to speak publicly about this. I've received, I don't deserve praise. I'm not. It should be stated, I'm not profiting from my involvement in the book or the TED Talk. I think we should be, we have a collective encumbrance to look at, because this is our fellow men who are perpetrating this. So instead of someone else, from the exterior saying, you have a problem, it's all of you, it should be generated from within, I think, and saying this is symptomatic of a construct that's old hat and is failing us and is doing damage.
Much bigger.
Yeah, but it's deep rooted, it's historical as hell.
And I think what you're touching on there is something that many people, many men feel, and it may play out in many different ways, right? For you now, you're clearly entering a conversation that involves questioning masculinity. Right, something that I'm obviously into myself. So, okay, what next? Where does this go?
In schools, I would love to be talking with young men. I would love to be sitting in circles discussing, how do we look at this issue as the issue of sexual violence and discussing consent in a broader context of an awareness of gender, an awareness of ourselves as young men.
So, where do you see the conversation around consent at the moment? And I suppose more specifically with teenage boys?
That was one of the hopes in speaking publicly, was that, in my circumstance, Thordis couldn't give consent.
Yeah.
And now it's legislated that in the Crimes Act that if you cannot communicate consent, then consent can't be established.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more I think the awareness is growing around it.
Yeah.
And you know, and how to have that conversation, and the fact that consent might be there at one point, but then it's not there 5 minutes later, so it has to be checked in with and
reassessed. Yeah. And so, you know, we're talking about, okay, let's have this conversation, let's get into perhaps schools and have this conversation around consent, because at the moment, where does the awareness and the education around this come from? The traditional sex ed? Like, what is it?
I guess that's the only vehicle for it. You know, it's through peers, but it's online as well.
Yep.
And one could say through pornography, people are getting some kind of, you know, misconception about what consent is. So,
and sex in general.
Correct.
For Tom Stranger, stepping really into this field and this conversation, what does this look like down the line? What's the kind of, I suppose, this is a hard question, but ideal outcome? Where does it go?
If there's a chance to speak in schools, great. There is a producer I'm in a conversation with at the moment who's looking to have to design a film or a documentary around male sexuality, and there's a chance that I might have some involvement in that. And it doesn't have to be on a broad scale. It can be informally. It can be, you know, with people on a bus, with friends, wherever, you know, as long as it is.
The conversation is happening, right? And I feel that, you know, myself, this is something that I'm very passionate about in terms of changing the stereotype of what it means to be a man. And there was a little throwaway comment almost you said before, which was, I have a very supportive wife. Right, and so, you know, I know you and I know your wife, so obviously I know that that's the case, but I also know that you got married in and around when this was all kind of becoming public to some degree in the big scheme of things. So,
well, I think I had a number of short and unsuccessful relationships for years because I was carrying this dark secret. So I met my wife about a month and a half, 2 months after Cape Town.
Right.
When I had a completely different relationship with myself, view on the world. I was, you know, 10 kilograms lighter and really open. She received this and she spoke about, you know, good to know kind of the good, bad and ugly of you.
Yeah.
She understood it as part of my past, but not as dictating the entirety of who I am and what our relationship would be. And safe to say, I would not be able to do this if it wasn't for having her in my life. I think she's been just a constant, and looks at me as I guess the here and now Tom, while still understanding that I was once capable of doing something really hurtful. Yeah. But you know, she's supportive. She has my back, and you know, we enjoy simple good times together. We get in the ocean, and we're grateful for the here and now, I guess.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I think we'll cap the interview there. It's been amazing to talk about this. You know, we know each other, and I've had a little bit of a concept of this conversation, but to get into it today was amazing. And you know, I think it's incredibly brave for you to step forward and have this conversation. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Mike.
Click on the link below and go to beyondthebeers.tv. There you can sign in to watch the rest of the episodes for free, as well as all the episodes of the show. Otherwise, make sure you share this episode with at least one man you think will enjoy or benefit from it. Now go out into your own life and start having these more meaningful conversations. Ask for help. Ask a mate how he's really doing. Or if he just wants to have a real conversation and go beyond the beers.